Islamic Republic. The 2021 Iranian protests are ongoing protests in Iran. In many regions, to protest the ongoing water shortages and blackouts of electricity all over Iran. Fueling public anger, protests erupted on the 15th of July to protest the water shortages and crisis. But soon was met with police violence and brutality. The protests has been dubbed Uprising of the Thirsty. The protest started on the 15th of July in Khuzestan in response to the water crisis. But they quickly spread to other provinces and turned political in nature. With protesters in various cities calling for the end of the Islamic Republic. Iran's water crisis has reached a critical point. Even the regime's state-run media have acknowledged the dire situation. With at least 700 villages out of water. Quote, of Iran's population of 85 million. About 28 million live in areas with water shortages and are under pressure in this regard. Mainly in the central and southern regions of the country. Water shortages have affected all sections of society. From urban households to agricultural and rural communities, wrote the state-run Aftab News on Sunday, July 4, 2021. The struggle of buffaloes in the sewage of the city that was once the shores of the wetland has only one message. An environmental catastrophe is happening in silence, wrote the state-run Aman Daily in this regard. On July 4, for the last few days, the water crisis in Iran, mainly in the south, reached a critical point, leaving people without water for hours. People took to the streets, pointing the blame at the regime and its corrupt policies. In Ahvaz, angry protesters blocked the main road while protesting severe water shortages on the night of 15 July, starting the protests. According to reports from Iran, cities like Ahvaz, Boston, and Masha witnessed protests and people clashing with the security forces. Massive gunfire was used to disperse crowds of people in many areas. Like Suzagad, in Hamidiye, there was a heavy police presence as 300 plus people started rallies chanting "I am thirsty." On the 16th of July, street protests continued, with thousands and thousands of demonstrators marched on the streets of Ahvaz, Masha, Bushehr and Boston. According to media sources, one person was killed during protests in southeastern Iran by gunfire. People threw stones as protests construed through the night. On the 17th of July, hundreds of videos circulated online from citizens, journalists and media sources from the protest marches, like in Kut-e Abdollah, Karkesh and Shush, where regime forces opened fire on the protesters, killing 3 protesters. Gunshots can be heard in other cities as tens of thousands of protesters marched and set vehicles on fire and chanted anti-regime slogans. On the 18th of July, thousands rallied again in more areas across Iran to protest the water shortages. Videos showed people setting fire to tires, blocking roadways in anger. Anti-riot police in helmets and camouflage fatigues scuffled with demonstrators. Police also fired shotguns in one video, though it wasn't clear if it was live ammunition or so-called beanbag rounds, designed to be less lethal. On the night of the 18th and on the 19th, demonstrations escalated with further violence and protests. In Suzagad, defiant youths resisted the heavily armed state security force while chanting, "We will not accept humiliation," and "People demand regime change." The SSF Special Anti-Riot Units tried to disperse the demonstrators by firing tear gas and pepper spray, firing bird shots, and directly targeting the defenseless protesters, which wounded many people. However, the youths resisted them by throwing rocks while chanting anti-regime slogans. In Shush, demonstrators surrounded the governor's office. Terrified of the growing anger of the demonstrators, the SSF retreated into the building and closed the gate. The defiant youth set fire at the main Ahvaz-Shush highway in the Al-Baji area north of Ahvaz and the main road in the Malashia area south of the city. In Khorramshahr, to prevent the spread of protests, regime security forces set up checkpoints at the entrance to the city and arrested youths and protesters. One police was shot dead in the protest on the 19th of July. Protests intensified in Khuzestan. Videos of water protests in Khuzestan province, which has a large population of Iranian Arabs, showed demonstrators chanting in Arabic, "We are thirsty." Quote, "We want the regime to fall." Quote, roads were blocked by burning tires and stones in Ram Hormuz as rallies gained steam in Ahvaz, where more than 5,000 people gathered chanting, "We want the regime to fall." Protesters called for the governors to resign outside the governorates of both areas. In other videos, to quell protests, police were seen firing tear gas and live ammunition to disperse protesters. Ghasem Khaziri, 17, from the southwestern city of Ahvaz, and Mustafa Namavi, 30, from the nearby city of Shadgan were confirmed to be dead during further demonstrations on 20 and the 17th of July. On the 20th of July, Pr.